before, the Visuddhimagga, the path of purification. This is like almost like the sutta equivalent to the path of purification. It shows you how the mind is purified stage by stage, from the very beginning all the way to the very end. And as such, it is again, it's one of these overview suttas, which shows you the big picture, how things are, it's like a particular process. This here is the process of purification, and how you use that process from the beginning of the path all the way to the end. It's a very nice kind of framework for how to understand the Buddhist path. Okay, so let's just start and see where this leads us. So, bhikkhus, there are gross defilements of gold, soil, grit, and gravel. Now the soil remover or his apprentice first pours the gold into a trough and washes, rinses, and cleans it. When that has been removed and eliminated, there still remain middle-sized defilements in the gold, fine grit and coarse sand. The soil remover or his apprentice washes, rinses, and cleans it again. When that has been removed and eliminated, there still remain subtle defilements in the gold, fine sand and black dust. So the soil remover or his apprentice washes, rinses, and cleans it again. When that has been removed and eliminated, only grains of gold remain. So I will just stop there and just talk a little bit about what is going on here. So this is the simile here is a simile for the purification of the mind. So the purification of the mind is said to be similar to the purification of gold. How gold, when it's extracted from the ground, goes through a certain process. And of course that process here you will see is you start by removing the coarse defilements, and then you go on to the middling defilements, and then on to the more refined defilements, right? And you have to follow that sequence, right? You can't start off, taking out the very fine defilements first. You have to do the gross ones first, and then move down in a particular sequence. It is the only sensible way of going about this. And because this is a simile for how you purify the mind, it's exactly the same thing for the mind. You have to actually understand that there is a sequence for purifying the mind. You can't do the purification randomly. You have to know where to purify first, and then to do things in the right sequence. Only then is it actually effective. And to be able to do that, you have to know yourself. You have to know what are the main problems you have in your own meditation, in your own practice in daily life. And only when you understand yourself, you understand the main problems that you have, only then will you be able to do what is appropriate for your stage of the practice. So knowing yourself is important, understanding yourself, understanding where you're at. And so to give you a rough idea of what's going on here, you will see this later on as well. The first one, which are the really coarse defilements, this refers basically to acts of speech and body, right? Mainly to acts and speech of body, and also to the mental states that give rise to those bad acts of body and mind, which go against the 5 precepts and that sort of thing, right? That's what that refers to, essentially. This is the coarse kind of defilements. So this is the very first level. And the aspects of the mind, they go together with, obviously, with the body. So if you restrain the body from these things, you're also purifying the mind. So you can see that this is purely on the level of ordinary ethics, pretty much. And then the middling defilements here, that refers to, especially to the coarser defilements of the mind, like ill will and strong desires and these kind of things. Desire and ill will, essentially. And again, you will see this later on. And both of these things, both the coarse aspects of the ordinary ethics of life and also the removing of the coarser defilements of the mind, both of these are necessary. These are prerequisites for meditation to be possible. So at this stage, we haven't really even started with meditation yet. Meditation really comes after this particular stage. That's quite interesting, right? Because it means that, well, when we meditate, are we really at that stage where meditation can start? And the thing is here to understand that what the Buddha means by meditation, when he talks about meditation, is actually a very elevated state of mind, right? It's where you are already very mindful. You're not really distracted by the defilements. You have a sense of clear presence already, right? And then when you put your attention on the object of your attention, the mind stays with it. It's not hard, and it's not so hard. It's actually very quite natural because your mind is already quite pure. That is what the Buddha really means by meditation, right? By jayati or satipatthana, etc. Often when people do meditation, it's not at that stage. Does that mean we shouldn't do meditation? No, you can still use it, but remember that the purpose is to help you in your virtuous conduct, right? To help you in overcoming the coarsest defilements of the mind. That is the purpose. So you use that meditation not to try to watch the breath necessarily, but to use it to help you to refine your conduct, to refine your mind. And then you're using meditation that is appropriate for whatever stage you're at in your practice. So remember that. Know yourself, understand your mind, know where you're at, and then apply the appropriate tool for where you are on the path. If you don't apply the appropriate tool, you're not gonna be able to progress as you otherwise would. So fortunately, the gradual training is laid out in quite a bit of detail, so it's quite easy normally to know roughly where you're at on this path. And then, when these causal defilements have been removed, then there's only subtle defilements in the goal, right? So the subtle defilements, these are the type of defilements that we remove through meditation, through satipatthana, through anapanasati, and through these other meditation techniques. Just by watching the breath, that's actually enough to purify your mind. There's a natural process of purification happening just by watching the breath. At that point, that's when the real meditation starts to kick in. So remember that, there's a sequence here. The second thing which is interesting here, of course, which is worth noting, is this idea that it's like refining gold, right? It's not just refining iron or refining, it's actually we're talking about refining gold here. So the mind is likened to gold, right? Just like gold is the most precious of material substances, perhaps diamonds, but whatever, let's say gold. In the same way, the mind is really the most precious aspect in a human being. And just like gold only comes out when it's refined, the purity of the gold, the shining effect of the gold, the beauty of gold comes out only when it's really pure. In the same way, the mind, the beauty of the mind only comes out when the mind is purified, right? An ordinary mind is nothing too much, but a mind which is purified is the source of enormous happiness. And this is something that you see throughout the suttas. In the same way that gold which is refined is beautiful. Of course, the mind is much more valuable than gold, but there is a point here to the fact that gold is used in this simile and not just any other substance. Okay, so this is maybe one other thing which is a little bit of interest. When I give these talks about the suttas, I'm aware that when there's so many people together, people are all kind of different levels. Some of you have lots of experience in reading suttas, and some of you know Pali, and some of you do all kind of things, and some of you are beginners. So I'm trying to kind of interest everyone a little bit. So sometimes I will talk about things which maybe some people may not even understand, perhaps. But don't despair because of that. The basic message is still quite simple. Then focus on the basics. Think about things which are, which make sense to you. Hopefully, it will be relatively clear. And if it isn't, you can always ask questions later on. But one of the things which I found is interesting here as well, and it's just an important point in understanding why the suttas sometimes can be very important, and that is the word that is used for defilement here. Do you have some idea what that word might be? Many of you would probably think that the word for defilement is kilesa, right? Kilesa is kind of the usual word you will hear for defilements. But actually that is not the word that is used here. It's a word that is related to that, but it's actually upa kilesa is actually the word that is used. And this is one, it's interesting because usually people will think that kilesa is the word for defilement, but actually the word used in the suttas is upakilesa. And what this shows you and is that the word kilesa is mostly used in the commentarial literature. What this shows us is the kind of the power and the influence exerted by the commentarial literature on our minds as to what the teachings of the Buddha actually say. We think that the word used for defilement is always going to be kilesa, because that is the word used in the commentaries, but actually in the suttas it's upakilesa. And you find that within a very large part of the Buddhist world that this is the case. People think that kilesa is the word for defilement. And what is happening here is that the commentarial literature, the commentaries, all the things that are not the word of the Buddha, right? When I say commentarial literature, I mean the things that are not literally the word of the Buddha. What is happening here is that these things have exerted so much influence over Buddhism, over the centuries, over the millennia, that we tend to think in terms of commentarial concepts and commentarial ideas, rather than in terms of the ideas that are spoken of by the Buddha. And this is a classic example of that. Everyone thinks it's kilesa. No, it's not actually kilesa, it's upakilesa in the suttas. In this case, it doesn't make much difference, right? It's just different words. It may make a bit of difference, and I think perhaps it does, but it's not a very serious thing. My point is just to show you how a lot of the way that we tend to interpret and understand Buddhism is through the understanding and through the language and through the ideas that have come down in the commentaries and not the ideas that are given by the Buddha himself. And this is an example, just an example of that, which is fairly not very dangerous in this case, but it can be. This is why it is so exciting to read the suttas and try to read them with fresh eyes without being too conditioned by the things that you have read elsewhere, particularly in the commentaries. Anyway, so that is just a little aside, which I just I find is interesting. You only really see this when you read the Pali text. You can't see it when you read the English, unfortunately. Yeah. Okay. You also have here, one of the things here which also is interesting is that you have the soil remover or his apprentice, right? What is all this thing about the apprentice doing there? Why isn't it enough just to have a soil remover? What is the apprentice doing here? Why is he involved? And I suspect that this is just kind of an Indian thing, right? In India in those days you would have the master and then you have the apprentice and they will work together. And that is just like things are often today, right? You have a plumber and he has his apprentice coming with him. And perhaps this is to be understood like the Buddha, right? The Buddha is like the master soil remover. He went before us. And we are like all the apprentices, right? We're trying to follow in the Buddha's footsteps and being the apprentice and trying to do what he did before us. It's a nice thought, isn't it, to think of yourself as the apprentice of the Buddha. That's what you are, in a sense, when you read the suttas and you're trying to practice the path after him. So we're all kind of apprenticing with the Buddha as our master, leading the way. Anyway, so that is the defilements there, starting with the coarse ones and gradually moving towards the more refined ones. And then the Buddha continues. Now we're moving over to the goldsmith. Before it was the soul remover, now comes the goldsmith comes into play here. The goldsmith or his apprentice now pours the gold into a melting pot, and he fans it, melts it, and smelts it. But even when this has been done, the gold is not yet settled, and the dross has not yet been entirely removed. The gold is not yet malleable, wieldy, and luminous, but still brittle and not properly fit for work. But as the goldsmith or his apprentice continues to fan, melt, and smelt the gold, a time comes when the gold is settled and the dross has been entirely removed, so that the gold becomes malleable, wieldy, and luminous, pliant and properly fit for work. Then, whatever kind of ornament the goldsmith wishes to make from it, whether a bracelet, earrings, a necklace, or a golden garland, he can achieve his purpose. So here we are continuing the simile, so still about refining gold, taking gold to its limit, to as refined as it can get. Here the goldsmith takes over, and he is now melting the gold, and he is trying to remove the very last parts of the defilements that exist in the gold. As long as there are defilements there, the gold is not yet malleable, wieldy and luminous, right? And again, this is an idea that also applies to the mind. The idea is that the gold has to be malleable, workable, before you can really make it into anything. And the mind is similar to that. And interesting, this last, we'll see later on what this actually means, these kind of very last defilements here. And then, as it does this, it says here, and this is quite an interesting little point here, he says, a time comes when the gold is settled and the dross has been entirely removed, right? It doesn't say when it is. It doesn't say what particular point on the path it is. It just says a time comes. And this is an important little pointer for our practice of meditation or our practice of the path more generally. We often don't know. We shouldn't really think about the goal of the practice. We shouldn't sit down with the idea, I'm going to get samadhi, right? I'm going to get jhana. I'm going to get insight. I'm going to get whatever. If you sit down with that, then you're bound to end up being frustrated because you don't know when it's going to happen. It's a time comes. That's what it says here. A time comes mean if you keep on doing it diligently, it will eventually happen, but you can't know when. That's what it means. So that is quite interesting, and it shows us what meditation should be about. It shouldn't be about having grand ideas about where we're going, what the results of the practice are going to be. What it should be about is putting in place the causes, the conditions that give rise to the results. That is what the practice is about. So always focus on the causes, and when you focus on the cause in the right way, you know the results are going to come as a matter of course eventually. The time will eventually come. But you cannot force this thing to happen. It is always a time comes when it happens. And then eventually that goal becomes malleable, wieldy, luminous, right? And all of these are aspects also applied to the mind. The mind becomes luminous, right? Pabbasara is the Pali word, and pabbasara is often this word that is talked about a lot. You can see this discussed in all kind of Buddhist forums and all these kind of things on the web if you're interested in that kind of stuff. And sometimes it is kind of implied that this is the real essence of the mind, right? This is the kind of the permanent essence of the mind that is always underlying all kind of reality and these kind of things. But in the suttas, the pabbasara citta, the mind which is luminous, is precisely the mind which is free of defilements. And it is a conditioned mind, just like everything else. Defilements come and go. And that's really all it means, according to the suttas. And you can see that right here. The pabbasara citta, the luminous mind. Still a very beautiful way of explaining the mind, right? That it's luminous, bright, beautiful, clear. It has a very kind of positive feel about it. The mind is being luminous. And then, because the mind, the gold is wieldy, because it's workable, because it is something you can work with this gold, that is when you can create whatever you like out of it. That's what it's saying here. Okay, so that is the simile from the simile, and then we come to how this actually happens in practice, and how we do this as part of the Buddhist path. So too, bhikkhus, when a bhikkhu or a bhikkhuni or a layperson or anyone is devoted to the higher mind, there are in him gross defilements, bodily, verbal and mental misconduct. An earnest, capable bhikkhu or anyone else abandons, dispels, terminates and obliterates them. When this has been done, there remain in him middling defilements, sensual thoughts, thoughts of ill will, or thoughts of harming. An earnest, capable bhikkhu abandons, dispels, terminates and obliterates them. When this has been done, there remain in him subtle defilements, thoughts about his relations, thoughts about his country, and thoughts about his reputation. An earnest, capable bhikkhu abandons, terminates, and obliterates them. So I will just stop there, because this is the same as the first paragraph that we were looking at before with the gold. So this actually fits into that paragraph. You have 3 stages of removing defilements of gold, and here you have 3 stages of removing defilements of the mind. So the first thing here, it says that, so to bhikkhus, when a bhikkhu is devoted to the higher mind, this is the adhicitta, and the adhicitta in the suttas has a sense of samadhi. In particular, it refers to the states of jhana specifically. So if that's what we're heading for, and of course that's a very important part of the Buddhist path, then this is how you do that. And remember that, as I was saying this morning, is that it's not just samadhi that increases, not just the calm and the peace that increases, but the ability to see things clearly. The vipassana also is a function of the same thing, right? As you decrease the defilements, you start to see things clearly. So calm, samatha vipassana, calm and clear seeing, going together as you go through this process of cleansing and purifying yourself. So you are devoted to the higher mind, which basically means samatha and vipassana. So, the first thing then, there are gross defilements. So here you can see, excuse me. So here you see what these gross defilements are, and this was what I was mentioning before. They are the bodily and verbal misconduct, right? Just the things that we talk about all the time. I'll talk more about this later on. And also the very gross mental misconduct that leads to these kind of bad conduct of the body and speech. So this is the first thing, right? This is the first thing that we need to ask ourselves. Are we pure enough in our bodily conduct? Are we pure enough in our verbal conduct? This is always the first thing here. And if not, that is where our attention really should be placed. Because that is the basic defilements where we need to make an effort, need to change. And then, if that is where we need to put our attention, then the earnest, capable bhikkhu, he abandons, dispels, terminates, and obliterates those gross defilements in him. So one of the interesting things here is that it refers to an earnest and capable bhikkhu, right? Earnest here, the Pali word, means something like one who has the intention to do something, one who wants to do this. So this is obviously very important, right? To be able to succeed on the Buddhist path is quite a demanding path. You really have to apply yourself a lot, right? Because to have success, you need to keep on doing this again and again over a long period of time. And because of that, you have to have a very clear intention that this is what you want to do. You have to be earnest about it. You really have to apply yourself. Otherwise, it isn't going to work. And so this is kind of one of the problems here, that you really have to have this intention. And you have to be capable, right? You have to actually have and part of that being capable is to have the intention to do it in the first place. So you have to be capable. In other words, you have to have enough understanding of the teachings, enough intention to do it, to actually apply yourself properly to achieve these things. Capable does not mean that you have to be kind of, very incredibly intelligent or anything like that. But it means that you have to have the interest, you have to have the seeing the danger in these things, seeing the danger of, seeing the dukkha, the problems in the world, and seeing the potential for happiness if you apply yourself in the right way. This is basically what it means. It doesn't mean that you need to be some kind of special person. Anybody can do this as long as you apply yourself in the right way. But this is important, right? This idea that we want to apply ourselves in the right way. You have to have that mind which wants to do these things. And that is perhaps one of the most difficult things in Buddhism, is to actually give rise to the mind which actually, you maybe have a little bit of understanding that this is there's something to be done here, something important to be done. But unless that understanding is clear enough and powerful enough, it is not going to lead to the results that the path can lead to. So to do that, you have to give rise to confidence in the teachings, right? You have to give rise to understanding, a basic understanding, what the issues that are at stake here, what is it really all about? And the more your understanding is, and the more you have confidence that these teachings actually work, the more you will apply yourself in the right way. And that's how you become a capable and earnest person who is able to dispel these defilements. You really have to want to do it. Only then will you have success. So keep on reading the suttas, keep on studying these things. Try to check it out if it actually is true to how you experience your life. And then gradually that feeling of, I've got to really act on this will come, it will arise by itself. And then when that capability, earnestness and capability is there, then you will abandon, dispel and terminate, obliterate those gross defilements in your mind. That's how you will succeed in this once you are capable and earnest. So that sounds, this is a very interesting little phrase there, this phrase about abandoning, dispelling, terminating and obliterating these defilements. And we have to be very careful in the suttas when we come across these kind of expressions which seem very strong. We have to be careful that we understand them in the right way. Excuse me. If we misunderstand these kind of statements, we can really go astray on the Buddhist path. When you first read that, you think it almost sounds like you really have to get in and use enormous amounts of willpower, right? To really exert yourself, really kind of pressure your mind and kind of use almost like violence, right? It's like obliterating, dispelling. It sounds almost violent. And sometimes you have metaphors in the suttas where the metaphor of the soldier, for example, is also found in the suttas. But we have to be careful not to over-interpret what is there. And one of the things that is very obvious, I think, to anyone who has tried to abandon defilements in their life, you will know that if you use willpower to try to ban defilements, it doesn't really work. All willpower can really do is to suppress the defilements. You can kind of hold them down by force, but you can't actually eliminate them. As soon as you let go of the willpower, as soon as you let go of that active suppression with your mind, the defilements come back up again, right? This is the problem. So you're not really obliterating them by willpower. So that is enough. It shows you that what this means, it cannot really mean willpower, because willpower does not actually obliterate, terminate, and dispel these kind of defilements at all. All it does is hold them into check for the time being. So what this means, and I will show you later on what this means from other suttas, what this means, it means using wisdom, using your intelligence, using the teachings of the Buddha. And this is going to be, as I said before, one of the main themes of this particular retreat, how to use the teachings of the Buddha to obliterate the defilements, how to think in such a way that when you think in that way, the defilement vanishes just like that, right? And this is the power of wisdom. Willpower can never actually end a defilement as such, but wisdom can. All you have to do is change your attention. You attend to an object in one way, ill will arises. You attend to exactly the same object in a slightly different way, and you feel compassion, you feel kindness, and you feel goodwill instead. Right? The only difference there is how you attend. That's all it is. The object is exactly the same. And this is what we mean by wisdom in Buddhism, is attending, using your perception, using your thinking mind in such a way that it gives rise to wholesome states rather than unwholesome ones. And that is so powerful that the unwholesome state is obliterated. It just disappears, right? There's no force being used. There's no ill will there. There's no effort or exertion. There is a bit of exertion because you have to attend in the right way, but it's a very subtle kind of exertion. It's a slight movement of the mind in the right place, and that is enough to actually change the whole state of mind that you're dealing with. So it's a very powerful and it's a very important distinction between using the mind in the right way, using wisdom and using willpower on the other hand. Does this mean that we should never use any willpower? I don't think there is such a thing as never anywhere. I think once you get into never, you are getting into dodgy territory. I think sometimes we all need to use a bit of willpower. We need to kind of, hold back. The defilements are so strong, I'm about to do something very stupid. Okay, pull myself out of the situation, right? Sometimes we need to do that. But the idea here, the general idea is that to overcome these defilements, it's a matter of wisdom, a matter of how we attend, a matter of being wise about these things, and not willpower. That's a general rule for how to deal with these things. And I'm going to talk about this much more as we go through this retreat. Okay, so that is the first type of defilement. Then, once you have dealt with those, then you come to the middling defilements, the middling upakilesa. And these are the thoughts of sensual thoughts, thoughts of ill will, and thoughts of harming. So now we are starting to deal with the mind, and this passage here is very almost in parallel to the passage on sense restraint in the gradual training. The gradual training, there's a passage known as sense restraint, and this is basically what this is about, very similar to that. So sensual thoughts, all the thoughts about the happiness in the world of the five senses, right? Relationships, having nice food, seeing good, nice movies, and all this kind of stuff. One of the few essential thoughts that is usually allowable in Buddhism is enjoying nature. So that is one of the nice things. You come out here, you enjoy the nice sunset, you listen to the birds, you see the nice trees, etc. That is what even the arahants are sometimes said to have enjoyed those things at the time of the Buddha. So nature is okay, because nature tends to make you peaceful. The city is where normally you get kind of agitated, and which is the problematic type of sensual pleasures. So sensual, I'm going to talk more about sensual pleasures later on in this retreat. I think it's quite an important topic, and there are some very beautiful suttas about this, how to deal with that, how to think about that in a way which is beneficial for meditation practice. Thoughts of ill will, I'm going to talk about that as well later on, how to overcome ill will. This is probably the most important of all defilements to overcome. It's very obstructive, it makes you tired, it makes you restless, it makes you do crazy things, right? So very important to overcome the thoughts of ill will, the intentions of ill will. So I will talk more about that as well. And the last one here is thoughts of harming, it's called here. Thoughts of harming, the Pali word here is hingsa or vihingsa. And it is basically what it means is harming is not a bad translation. But the opposite of this, harming is, or what this also means, is like the idea of being ruthless, right? Ruthless means that you don't really care about the consequences for other people or other beings. If you are a ruthless business person, it means that profit is everything, right? The growth of my company means everything, and it doesn't matter the kind of consequences it has for the people or the animals or whatever around me. I don't care about that. It doesn't matter. What I want is my business to have success. That's kind of the ruthless business person. So this is what it means. So in English, the word Ruth is of course a name, right, in the English language. And that name Ruth actually means compassion in English. So ruthless quite literally means without compassion, devoid of compassion. So the opposite of this word vihingsa or hingsa is actually, the opposite of that is compassion. So you can imagine the opposite of compassion, right? What is that? Having a cold heart, right? Not really caring about other beings, being ruthless, being inconsiderate. All of these things are part of this idea of harming here. This is the problem we're talking about here. So the opposite of that is to develop then compassion. And the opposite of ill will is metta, slightly different from compassion, but very closely related. And the opposite of sensual thoughts basically is the spiritual happiness, if you like. The abandoning of sensual thoughts is really finding your happiness in the spiritual happiness instead, the happinesses of meditation or of just being a good person. So again, the earnest, capable person, he abandons, dispels, terminates, and obliterates these things, right? And you can see that here, because we are in the realm of sense restraint, we are still not really arrived at the realm of meditation. We're still in the realm of how to use your mind in ordinary life to move yourself away from these defilements. But now, the last one here, this is where we are moving into the realm of meditation practice proper as it is spoken about in the suttas. And these are the subtle defilements, defilements about one's relations, about one's country, and about one's reputation. So these defilements are still related to the defilements we saw before, right? Your relations in your country, there's a certain amount, a certain degree of attachment there, which probably has to do with sensuality to some extent. But also an important aspect of these particular defilements is that they have to do with your identity. This is who you are, right? This is how we define ourselves. Who your relatives are, what country you come from, your reputation, what kind of education you have, all these other kind of things. This has to do with our sense of identity. And as long as you have a sense of identity, the stronger that sense of identity is, that sense of identity needs to be supported, it needs to be bolstered, right? If you feel that in meditation you're becoming very peaceful, sometimes that means that you're no longer able to bolster your sense of identity, and your mind starts to think to keep that sense of identity in place. So identity can often be a hindrance to peace. And this is one of the beautiful things about the deeper you go into meditation, the less sense of identity you have. And the more you become just nothing, right? You become just this human being who's sitting there without identity. You don't belong to any country anymore. You don't belong to a gender. You don't belong to anything. You are just this being that is there. And that when you reduce that sense of identity, it actually enables you also to go deeper in your meditation practice. There's nothing you have to support. There's nothing you have to defend. There's nothing you have to bolster. You can just let go of all that and allow yourself just to be peaceful. So this is part of what this is about. And this is one of the things that you do in meditation practice. The Buddha often said that one of the effects and one of the most important aspects of a meditation like anapanasati, watching the breath, is precisely to stop the thinking mind. This is all about the thinking mind, the mind kind of roaming around in all these kind of things, thinking about all kind of stuff. And this is what anapanasati does. So this is where, and also satipatthana and anapanasati are very closely related to each other. So this is what you're doing here. By watching the breath, the mind is already very refined through the previous practice. Now you can start watching the breath and you are abandoning these particular things at this point. So you are becoming a person without identity. Isn't that kind of nice when we don't have so much identity? I always find all these things of people, nationalism and all this kind of stuff, I find it so silly. You know why? It means that we can't really understand other people of different nations. Isn't that just complete nonsense? To me, it doesn't make any sense at all. And at this point, you start to go away from that, and all you have is you're just human, right? You're just a being. You can relate with animals and humans and anybody, because you understand we're all in the same problems together here. Okay, then we move on to the next paragraph here. When this has been done, then there remain thoughts connected with the Dhamma. That concentration is not peaceful and sublime, not gained by full tranquilization, not attained to unification, but is reined in and checked by forcefully, it says here, suppressing of the defilements. So, at this point, he says here, there's only thoughts connected with the Dhamma. Again, I am not sure if that is the best translation for this, because you can think about the Dhamma in many ways, but the point here is that the mind is very pure. So the point here is that it's only thoughts that are in accord with the Dhamma, that accord with the Dhamma. So what are the thoughts that accord with the Dhamma? Metta, right? Compassion, renunciation, peace. These are the thoughts that actually accord with the Dhamma. So at this point, all your thinking is kind of metta thoughts, right? Compassion thoughts. That's all you ever have in your mind, all the time. And then the Buddha says, that is not good enough. You've got to go beyond that as well. That's what he's saying here. And the reason why I think it means thoughts that accord with the Dhamma is because that is the kind of sequence you find in other suttas. You come to a point, the Buddha says, okay, now all you have left in your mind, all these beautiful thoughts of kindness, that's all that's left there. But he says, even if you have that, that too will tire the mind eventually. It will make you feel that you need some sort of deeper rest to really rest the mind properly. So you have to get rid of those thoughts as well. And only then, when you get rid of all thinking, all movement of the mind, is it possible for the mind to rest in samadhi, right? Rest in the true peace of the mind. So even those beautiful thoughts have to be let go of. And then the samadhi can arise as a consequence from that. So, and I'll show you later on in other suttas how this actually works out. Then that concentration, because there are still thoughts connected with the Dhamma, it's interesting that it's called that concentration, right? That samadhi. We're already moving into samadhi territory, but the mind is still moving a little bit. It's not yet peaceful and sublime, not yet gained by it's not yet fully tranquilized, not attained to unification, but reined and checked by forcefully suppressing the defilements. But because there comes a time when his mind becomes internally steady, composed, unified, and concentrated, samadhied. That concentration is peaceful and sublime, gained by full tranquilization and attained to unification. It is not reined in and checked by forcefully suppressing defilements. Then, there being a suitable basis, he is capable of realizing any state realizable by direct knowledge towards which he might incline his mind. So, you abandon even the thoughts connected with the Dhamma. You abandon the thoughts of metta and compassion as well. And your mind becomes internally steady, composed, unified, and concentrated, it says here. This is samadhi, samadhati, or something like that. And this sequence of words that you see here, you have to know these kind of standard sequences you find in the suttas. This basically means at this point you're entering the jhanas, you're entering the world of the jhanas. You have left the body behind, all the senses behind. All the thinking is gone, right? Even the thoughts that accord with the Dhamma, gradually moving away from all that. There's nothing left, and you're entering the world of the jhanas. And again, you can see here this idea that there comes a time, right? You cannot force the jhanas to come about. There's not something you can will to happen. You just have to wait patiently. And if the causes are put in place for this to happen, it will happen by itself in due course. So just wait. Just chill, just relax, wait in the present moment, and then these things will happen all by themselves. And that concentration is peaceful and sublime, right? Panita, santa panita, gained by full tranquilization. Full tranquilization means the mind is completely not unmoving, is completely samadhied, so to speak, attained to unification. There's not kind of a sense of unity in your mind. Everything is unified into one. There's only one perception, right? Unification means only one perception, only one thing happening inside of you. This idea of unification of mind, it's a very powerful term. And then the last one here, which is very interesting, it is not reined and checked by forcefully suppressing the defilements. Forcefully here, is the word here is sankhara, and sankhara is just another word for intention. So there is no intention. You don't need any intention anymore. There's no intention. And suppressing just means that they are under control, right? That these things are kind of held in check by a certain control of the mind. And this is the problem, even when you have thoughts of metta all the time, even though you have a mind which is completely compassionate, there's always a risk that defilements can arise at any time. If you let down your guard and you see kind of a negative aspect in somebody, suddenly the ill will starts to arise, right? Because you have let down your guard. And this is the problem, even if you have metta, is that it's so easy for the mind to shift, and then you see something negative instead. So you always have to be alert, you always have to be on the guard. And this is why we have this idea of sense restraint. Sense restraint is precisely this idea of being, guarding all the time, watching, knowing your mind, right? What's happening in your mind? Are you guarding it, or are you just allowing things to happen at random? And if you know your mind well enough, you are able to guard it so that these defilements do not arise. But of course, this is tiring, and this is what the jhana state is about. You don't have to do this anymore. There is no more intentional control. Instead of translating this as forcefully suppressing, you can translate it as intentional control. The mind is no longer reined and checked by intentional control of the defilements. The intention is no longer required. Finally, you can rest, right? For the first time, you can really rest, you can really relax, because the mind is absolutely free from these defilements, and there's no danger that they will arise as long as you are in that attainment itself. And this is why these attainments are so useful, because you don't have to be on your guard anymore. And that state of samadhi, that state of freedom from the defilements, you take that with you as well afterwards. You take it with you out of the samadhi. This is explicitly mentioned in the suttas. And it's because you take it out, take it with you as you go out. That is the reason why these states are so powerful. And they give you a chance then to see things in accordance with reality afterwards. And then, because your mind is free of defilements, because it is straight, this is called a straight mind, it's no longer bent by the defilements, you see things in accordance with reality. Because of that, there being a suitable basis, you're capable of realizing any state that is realizable by direct knowledge. What does that mean? It means that you can realize anything. You can become an arahant. You can reach full awakening. You can understand reality as it actually is. You can become a stream enterer. According to this sutta, you can do all kinds of crazy things afterwards. According to this sutta, you can walk on the water apparently afterwards. If you want to, if you want to walk on water or walk into a mountain or sink into the earth, then this is the way to do so according to the sutta. If you want to be able to read other people's minds, all of that you can do as well. But the really important stuff that you can do with this kind of mind, of course, are what in Buddhism are known as the three higher knowledges. You can recollect your past lives, you can understand the laws of karma, and you can destroy the defilements of the mind and become an arahant. That is basically what you can do at this stage. It says here there being a suitable basis. This just means that your samadhi is deep enough, right? You have a very deep state of samadhi. Sometimes maybe the first jhana is not enough, so you have to go deeper. But as long if the samadhi is deep enough, then anyone is capable of reaching awakening here. Sometimes it may also have a little bit to do with kind of your character and your inclination in your mind, which of these things you can do and which ones you can't do. So anyway, that is. I might, if we have time towards the end of the retreat, we can talk a little bit more about these fascinating things later on. But the main point here is basically just to remember that there is a gradual abandoning of defilements. And you have to understand that it is gradual. And you have to know yourself well enough to know where on this path you are and to apply yourself in the right place. And if you apply yourself in the right place, that is when you're going to have success in this Buddhist path. Know yourself. Don't pretend that you are where you are not. Don't kind of lie to yourself by saying, yeah, I'm a really good Buddhist, I must meditate really hard because I'm at that point. Well, it's pointless. You're not going to get anywhere if you're not being honest with yourself. You've got to have that sense of brutal honesty, right? Brutal in a kind of gentle sense. And then know where you are. And then work with the defilements that are your problem. And then you will be able to make beautiful progress on this path. So that is, again, just another overview of this whole path. And I will stop there. And then tomorrow we can move on to the gradual training. And tonight at 8 o'clock we'll have a Q&A session. Okay.